guys ever do something that you regret? Yeah, I hear some oofs, yeah. Think about it. Maybe it's something that maybe something you said. Maybe it's something that you were a part of, something that you did that you regret. You ever been there? Well, Chris Wetherell has. And if you don't know who this is, it's okay, I didn't either. But he is a guy known in Silicon Valley for his expertise in software development, which is why back in 2009, Twitter brings him in to help solve a problem. Twitter was having a problem at that time, 15 or so years ago. And the problem was they needed help spreading information. They wanted information on their platform to go faster, to go farther, and they brought this guy in to be a part of that solution. And that solution that this guy came up with is something that he called retweet. This is the guy that invented, that built, alongside a team of people, the retweet button for Twitter, which is a feature that's become so effective, we all know this, right? That it's fundamental to almost every social media platform that exists in one way or another. Now, here's the thing. It's not something he's celebrating. It's not something that he's proud of. In fact, if you listen to him talk about it, it's something that he says he deeply regrets. He was doing an interview, this is probably, 5 years ago, and he was talking about this. He was reflecting on, this team of people that invented the retweet button. And in particular, he recalled the time, the first time he says that he watched a Twitter mob use retweet. And this is what he remembers thinking. We might have just handed a 4-year-old a loaded weapon. That's what I think we actually did. See, if you listen to him talk, it's interesting because Chris Wetherell knows something important, and that thing that he knows that's important is that words are powerful. Words can be used for good, they can be used for harm, and they travel faster and farther than most of us realize. Jesus' half-brother James, he would agree. This is how he talks about our words in James chapter 3. He says, "Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire. It's a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body. It sets the whole course of one's life on fire and is itself set on fire by hell. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison." There's a downer of a verse, yeah? Right, but you hear his point, right? You hear what he's saying. He's saying, look, words are powerful, and how we as God's people use our words, it really matters. Now, I wonder where he got that idea from. Where did James get that idea from? Well, like I said, James was Jesus's half-brother. Same mom, different biological dad, yeah? And that means that James would have been most likely where Jesus was when he gave this Sermon on the Mount, this sermon that we're talking about. James would have heard his brother say these words. We'll pick up Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.'" Now, what Jesus is doing here in this verse is he's quoting something from long ago. He's quoting the Old Testament. This is Exodus chapter 20, and it simply says, "You shall not murder." You've heard of the 10 Commandments. This is the 6th. God says to his people, this is after he's rescued them out of Egypt. He's brought them out of their slavery. He's rescued them, and he says, okay, this is what it looks like to live in right relationship with me, right relationship with each other. And one of the things he tells them is that they should not murder each other. Why? Because God cares about human life. Human life has a God-given inherent dignity and value. And so he says, "You shall not murder." But what does that have to do with our words? Well, back to Jesus, because Jesus says, "You shall not murder." Jesus says, "You've heard that you shall not murder." And then he goes on. He says, "But I tell you," so you've heard, don't murder, "but I tell you that anyone who's angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raka," is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. You see, Jesus is going deeper. He says, look, you've heard it said, but I say to you, anyone who's angry, anyone who says raka was like a swear word back then. It was like a Aramaic swear word that meant something like empty-headed or good for nothing or I don't know, we might say something like idiot, right? So Jesus says, look, it's not just those who murder, it's anyone who's angry, anyone who says raka, anyone who says you fool. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm sure back then, and I would guess even now, there's something kind of going off inside of us, like the kind of uh-oh. Because here's a question. Is that you? Have you ever done that? Done what? Harbored anger towards someone? Had contempt for someone? Thought someone was an idiot, called them an idiot, maybe attacked their character? And the answer is we all have, yeah? We all have them too, and that's why Jesus is saying what he says. Look, he's not lowering the bar, he's going deeper. What makes murder possible? Anger. Where does anger start? In our hearts. Jesus is going deeper. And he says there's consequences for that. Look at what he says. There are consequences. He says, look, anyone who's angry will be subject to judgment. Anyone who says raka will be answerable to the court. Anyone who says fool will be in danger of the fire of hell. Judgment, answerable to the court, in danger of the fire of hell. Now, it's interesting, this word hell right here, it's actually the Greek word Gehenna. And Gehenna is a place, it's a valley. It was outside of the city of Jerusalem. It was the Hinnom Valley or the Valley of Hinnom. And it's a beautiful place now, but in the Old Testament, it was an awful place. It was a valley, like I said, where kings sacrificed kids. They lit them on fire, killed them. It was a place that eventually became a garbage dump. It was a place where people threw the dead bodies of executed criminals. It was a place that was marked by continuous fire, terrible sights, awful, unimaginable smells. And everybody knew it. And that's the place. That's the place that Jesus associates, not just with murder, but with anger, with our rage, with our contempt for other people. He uses an illustration. He's preaching a sermon, and he says, hey, you know this place that we all know about? He uses a place that they all knew about because he wanted them to see, look, we might not think it's that big of a deal, but Jesus wants them to know it really is. It's really that big of a deal. But the question then becomes, why? Like, why, Jesus, is it such a big deal? Well, if you've read the book of Genesis, you know that in chapter 1, verse 27, Genesis tells us something. It tells all of us that God created mankind. God created men and women. God created every human being in what? In his image. You and I were made in what the Bible says, the image of God. And we could spend a lot of time talking about that, different sermon, different day, but it's interesting because that phrase, the image of God, it comes up in a few other places in the Bible. One of the places that it comes up is just a few chapters later in Genesis chapter 9 and another in the book of James. I want you to pay attention to the two places that we see it. Here in Genesis 9:6, God says, whoever sheds human blood, by human shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God, God has made mankind. So if you kill a human, you deserve to die because humans have value. Humans have dignity. Inherent because they're created, they're made in the image of God. The book of James, chapter 3. With the tongue, James writes, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it, we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness, the image of God. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. This should not be. So you put those things together, and what you see is that because human beings are created in the image of God, because we have inherent God-given value, God-given dignity, we shouldn't murder each other. But also, because we've been created in the image of God, because we have dignity, because we have value, we also shouldn't use our words to bring harm. So we shouldn't hurt people physically, and we shouldn't hurt people verbally. Why? Because we're created in the image of God. Jesus is saying that murder is the ultimate form of saying that someone's life doesn't matter. And he goes deeper and he says, when we use words to belittle people, when we use words to hurt people, we're doing the same thing. See, what Jesus wants us to do is he wants us to rethink the harm that our words can bring. And I don't know about you guys, but as I was thinking about this, I was like, man, this is so relevant for right now. This is written preached 2,000 years ago, but it's so relevant right now because most of you, I don't know all of your situations, but most of you, if I had to guess, you're living in close quarters, you're sharing space, you're sharing stress, you're sharing group chats, you're sharing opinions, you're sharing all sorts of things with all sorts of people around you, and you don't have the skills to handle conflict well. For a variety of reasons, and that's not shade, that's just reality. I was the same way and in many ways still am. But here's the thing. The habits that you're forming, how you handle anger, how you speak when you're in the midst of conflict, how quickly you reconcile, those habits are forming you now in college, but they don't just stay with you in college. They follow you for the rest of your lives. And so Jesus is saying something back then, and he's saying something back to us right now. He's warning us about where our anger will lead us. But he doesn't just warn us. He doesn't just tell us what not to do. He shows us a better way. He shows us a better way to live. So we'll go on Matthew 5, 23 and 24. He says, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. See, I think sometimes we get the idea in these verses backwards. We think that what they tell us is that we should go to people quickly when we have a problem with them. Like if someone did something to hurt me, I should go to that person and tell them. There's wisdom in that, that's good, but it's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying, no, look. If a brother or sister, he's talking about Christians, right? If a brother or sister has something against us and we know it, we should go. We don't wait for them to come to us. We should go. We should first go and reconcile. See, I don't want you to miss that because it's a big deal. Because according to Jesus, making peace with each other, within the body of Christ, making peace with each other, it's so important that Jesus is saying we should actually interrupt our worship to go and make peace. Do you catch that? Let me fine point what Jesus is saying. He's saying that it's more important for you and I to be reconciled to each other in the midst of conflict than it is to be here at Veritas on Tuesday nights. It's more important for you to first go and reconcile with whoever that person is that you have conflict, that Christian brother or sister, before you go to your small group or before you come to church on Sunday. Because God is saying, what Jesus is saying to us is that if we try to pretend like we can worship him, but we're in conflict with each other, then something's messed up about our worship. Something's messed up. I'll share a story of a time where I got this very, very, very wrong. So early in my marriage to Noelle, we've been married about 15 and a half years now. And so this is probably, year one or two after the honeymoon, when we're trying to figure out what it looks like to live with a sinful person, right? Just sidebar, it's hard and nobody tells you it's hard until you get into it. So you have that to look forward to, some of you. But we're trying to figure it out. And there was a conflict. I have literally no idea what we were fighting about, but it was on a Sunday morning, which is the absolute worst. Get into a fight and then go to church. That's what happened. I don't remember anything about the fight, but I remember a lot of the circumstances. And one of the circumstances was that I was walking in through those doors about 10 feet ahead of my wife while she was crying behind me. And again, I don't know what we were fighting about. I have no idea if it was my fault or her fault, but I'm sure that I said something hurtful and mean. And she was crying as she was walking in the church behind me. And she asked me multiple times in the car on the way here as we're walking in, Kyle, can we please talk? Kyle, can we please talk? Kyle, can we please get this thing figured out? And I walked in and I sat over in that section. And she's sitting right next to me and she says, Kyle, can we please, she's still crying. Kyle, can we please talk? And I said, no, we're at church. I'm not gonna deal with that right now. We'll talk about it later. I'm clearly sharing that not as something to emulate, yeah? Because with 15 years of hindsight, what I realized is not only was that deeply, and I mean it, deeply dishonoring to Noelle, disrespectful in every way. What Jesus is saying in these verses, that it was also deeply dishonoring to God. Deeply dishonoring to him. See, what God is saying to us is, look, don't pretend like everything is okay with me if it's not okay in the body. That's how God talks about his people. Don't pretend like you're all good with me if you're not all good with other people. And so what that means for us is that, look, if you're in conflict right now, and I know some of you are, just the statistics of the room, some of you are in a fight with someone right now, what Jesus is saying is go and make peace. Go to that friend who's been ghosting you. Go and address the tension in your small group. Go and have the awkward conversation with the roommate about the thing both of you have been avoiding. Now, let me say something real quick. I'm not gonna talk nearly as long as I should, but I just wanna be really clear. What Jesus is not calling you and me or us back into is something dangerous. He's not calling you back into something harmful. He's not calling you into an abusive situation. But what he is calling all of us to do is to deal honestly with what's happening inside of our hearts. Now here's the thing. I know some of you are thinking right now, Kyle, I've done that. Like, I get it. I'm tracking with you, and I've tried, and I don't know what else to do, but it's not working. And to that I say, I hear you. And so does the Apostle Paul. Look at what he writes. This is Romans chapter 12. Paul writes, he says, look, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. You catch what he said? He's saying, look, live at peace with everyone. That's the goal, right? That's the Bible's goal, that we would live at peace with everyone as far as it depends on us, which means we always do our part. We apologize. We take responsibility for whatever the problem is and whatever our part of the problem is, however small or however big that is. We do our part. Sometimes it's not gonna be reciprocated. Live at peace as far as it's possible. It's not going to always be reciprocated, but it's our job, it's our responsibility to do our part, and our part is to say the hardest thing maybe in the English language. I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me? Why is it so hard to say that sometimes? It is, right? Like, if we're being honest, it's really hard. But here's the thing, it's not a suggestion. It's not a life hack. It's a command from God. See, I do this all the time. Gosh, we think that avoiding the conflict is what's going to bring the peace. Jesus is saying avoiding the conflict, it destroys peace. And so he wants us to rethink our words, and he wants us to reconcile, and he wants us to do all of that quickly. Because this is what he says in the next verse. Jesus says, settle matters quickly with your adversary who's taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and then you'll be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you've paid the last penny. Jesus is saying, look, we have to handle these things quickly. The Apostle Paul, he writes this in Ephesians 4. He says, don't let the sun go down while you are still angry. Do not give the devil a foothold. And see, Paul's onto something. He knows that when we don't deal with anger quickly, what happens is that we give the enemy a foothold. We create an opportunity for the enemy to bring about more harm, greater harm, more bitterness. Waiting, it lets bitterness fester. It creates more anger, more resentment, more problems. Jesus is saying, look, it's costly when we wait. See, remember what Jesus is trying to do. Let me zoom out just for a second. Remember what Jesus is trying to do in this sermon. If you've been tracking with us the last several weeks, he's trying to paint a picture of the good life. He's not trying to put us in a straitjacket and tell us how to live and not have any fun and just do what I tell you to do. He's trying to say, guys, I made you. You might not believe it, but I made you, and I know what's best for you. And so he's trying to give us this roadmap to the good life, and he's trying to give us this vision, this radical vision in this particular passage, this radical vision that every human being is created in the image of God. And that because of that reality, it should shape how we speak to each other. It should shape how we handle conflict. It should shape how quickly we go and make peace. Just think about that for a second. Just do this with me. Just imagine for a minute. Imagine for a second what our lives would actually be like if we did what Jesus said. Like if we were all just actually committed to what Jesus is saying here. If our words didn't escalate into contempt, if conflict, it didn't linger, if reconciliation, it was normal, not awkward or weird. See, that's the kind of community. That's the kind of people that God is calling, that Jesus wants us to be. And he does us a favor and he says, here's the way forward. Here's the way forward. So just to summarize, Jesus says, look, the way forward is we rethink the harm that our words can do. How do we move forward? How do we live this life? Where's the map? Jesus is saying, look, it starts here. We rethink the harm. We realize how powerful our words, we rethink the harm that our words can do. It's not just the crazy words, it's not just the extreme words, no, it's the subtle ones. Maybe you're into sarcasm, it's the sarcastic ones. It's the dismissive ones. It's the ones that we justify for whatever reason, but we have a reason, right? Jesus says that words that belittle and dehumanize other people doesn't just damage our relationships, it reveals a heart problem. And so we've got to rethink how we talk. Rethink the words, rethink the power that our words have in the lives of other people. And he says we reconcile instead of avoid. We don't wait for the other person to come to us. We don't pretend like nothing is happening. We don't hide. We lean in. We move toward. And so what that means is if you have something if you know someone has something against you, go. Like literally go. Send the text. Make the call. Set the meeting. Try this. Say these words. I'm sorry. Can you please forgive me? And maybe you just need to send that text tonight and say, hey, we can talk more about it, but I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I don't know how big of a part you play in it, but I played this part, so I'm gonna say, look, I'm sorry. Would you please forgive me? I love to get together and I love to talk more about what happened. And the third thing, we refuse to wait. We refuse to wait. Jesus says, look, waiting, it's not neutral. The longer that you and I wait in the midst of conflict, the more anger grows, the more stories we tell ourselves, the more foothold that we give the enemy. It feels easier, but in the end, it costs far more. It costs far more. And so let me ask the uncomfortable question that I'm sure you're expecting me to ask. Who is that person for you? Who is that person that you need to go to? Who are you still angry with? I don't know the reason, but who are you angry with? What is the conversation that you keep avoiding because you just don't want to handle it? What is the apology that you think that time is just going to erase? Maybe it's a roommate. Maybe it's a former friend, an ex, a small group leader, someone you see here on Tuesday nights, but you like to pretend that they're not here. Who is it? Who do you need to send the text to? Who do you need to have the conversation with? Some of us, it's not actually having the full conversation. Some of us, here's what the next step is. It's just deciding that tonight I'm done. Tonight is the night I'm done avoiding the problem. And so I'm gonna take the next step. I've said I'm done. I'm gonna write the name down. I'm gonna tell a friend that I need to talk to this person. I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna ask the Spirit to be with me, to give me the willingness to go and do a hard thing. I'm gonna pull a leader or another friend in to give me encouragement, to help me take that next step. I don't know what it is for you. Some of you need to go and have a conversation. Some of you just need to decide tonight, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not worth it. And you see, here's the good news, guys. Here's the good news. We have to remember this. Otherwise, this just becomes kind of a go and be, do better, try harder, be more. Like, no. Jesus is not calling us to do something that he hasn't already done for us. Think about that. Jesus is not asking us to do something that he was unwilling to do. He's not asking us to do something that he hasn't already done for us. You see, because though he was God, he was treated with contempt. Though he was God, he was mocked, he was insulted, he was called a fool, and instead of responding with rage and anger, he moved toward reconciliation at the cost of his own life. That's the reason. That's the reason why we can lay our anger down, because Jesus absorbed ours. That's the reason why we can move towards other people, because Jesus has already moved toward us. And here's the thing, he gives us his Spirit to do the thing that we couldn't do on our own. He doesn't just say, okay, I forgive you, now go. He says, no, here's the Spirit. Here's my Spirit to empower you to move toward other people. And so here's, just as we leave, what if this week you didn't wait? What if tonight you didn't wait, like literally when the night ends? What if you just went and sent the text? What if you woke up tomorrow and you just said, I need to have a conversation? What if you just said the hard, I'm not gonna wait anymore, I'm just going to say the hard thing in love? Because my words matter, and I want peace. See, that's who Jesus is calling us to. He's calling us to be a community of grace and humility and peace, people who rethink our words, people who reconcile with other people, people who refuse to wait because the cost is just too great. Let me pray that would be true of all of us. Jesus, I'll be the first to admit that I am so careless with my words. I use my words way too often as a weapon to hurt other people, to put other people down, to make myself look great. Gosh, it's so silly. Please forgive me. I pray that you would impress upon me and all of us here tonight a greater realization of the significance and the power of our words, that you would help us to rethink how we use them, that you would move us to want not avoidance, not the easy way, not comfort, but peace. Help us to be reconciled with other people. Help us to do it quickly. Help us to get over the fear. Help us to get over the delay. Help us to get over the desire to just have it comfortable and lean in. Thank you that that's exactly what you've done for us. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.